incentive. Because think about it, if I do a Zoom, I don't have to provide my driver's license. I just have to show it. So now I own your property that I bought for $400,000. There's no lien on it. And then I go put your house on the market, sell it. Multiple people are coming by and seeing the house, and they're taking deposits.
Ooh.
You know, me being me, I remember I created a bank, created the actual bank statements, and then showed that she had like $120,000 in reserves in this bank that had been open for, you know, I have 3, 4, 5 bank statements. And so we give them to them. And then, of course, you know, then they call the bank, and we have someone that answers the phone for the bank and transfers it. And then, of course, I get on the phone and I start tapping like, okay, what's the name? All right. Let's say you bring $10,000 to closing, but you get a check back for $38,000. So they're making $18,000 on the purchase price. So I remember I looked at him and I go, that's steering. And he goes, right. And I went, no. I said, that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that. And he went, hey, this is Matt Cox, and I'm going to be doing an interview with Bert Ferguson. He is a real estate agent, and we're going to be talking about some scams and some real estate fraud. And so check it out.
So we're going to talk about today different types of real estate fraud that's happening now in this era, 2023. You know, we've got social media, we've got Zoom, we've got things that have kind of advanced in the tech world since you were running the streets. And there's, I kind of wanted to get your perspective on it, what you would do in some of these, or what you would be thinking in some of these instances, and any insight you can give to people that watch my channel. A lot of people who do watch are people coming from out of state. Delaware's really big military. So some of these people don't come to settlement in person. So there may be chances where things get slipped up, documents get copied, whatever may have you. And I wanted to kind of get someone like you, who's an expert in it, even have a fine arts degree. So you can literally go from start to finish on creating a whole scam.
Right.
So I wanted to kind of go over that. So what we're going to, I guess the first one we'll go over is real estate fraud, is seller fraud, right? What we'll be going off of, there's an attorney's office here in Delaware, Ward & Taylor, and I have to give them a big shout out. So if you guys are watching this at Ward & Taylor, they handle a lot of real estate transactions here. And they came to our office about 2 weeks ago talking about some fraud that they've been seeing. So I wanted to kind of go over that. They had one instance where there was a homeowner or a listing agent who was contacted the attorney's office. The seller could not meet the listing agent at the property because they were out of state. And pretty much it was a fraudulent seller. This person would not get on Zoom. They had a fake driver's license. They called it says the listing agent called the seller by business number found online. The real seller was not selling that property. So basically it was an identity was kind of stolen a little bit. And I wanted to know with you.
Did it go through?
No, the deal did not go through. So what happened, I guess what ended up happening was the attorney's office tried to double down and just Googled and reached out to the real seller and said, hey, we're trying to get some documentation. What's going on? Why won't you answer the phone or Zoom? I'm not looking to sell my property, so I don't understand that. Right. So what I wanted to ask you, I guess with this first one here, when it comes to sellers or listing agents, while you were running your scam, were there any listing agents who sniffed anything, who smelled anything, or any specific instances where it was like, this is really weird. This guy wants to buy or sell these properties and nothing in our area is appraising or anything like that?
No, because it's funny that it's funny that you asked me that, because like nobody ever asked me that. Like, yeah, if you read my book, like I explain, for instance, I did a scam in South Carolina, which I've talked about. But when I was on the run, I was even more apt to actually show my face. Like when I was in Tampa, I didn't want the scam to be, any of the scams to leak back to me. Once they eventually did, and I went on the run, then I could care less. Okay. So at that point, I started approaching professionals to help me with my scam. So I just went, like, I would go meet you. You don't know who I am. It's not like if I showed up at your office and said, "Hey, listen, I want to buy a house in this area, and I've got 10% to put down on a house worth, $300,000. So I got like $30,000, maybe 40. I'd rather keep, 10 for myself to help with some, moving, whatever. But I got about 40 grand. I need somebody to owner finance their house for me. Can you look up some owner finance houses, 3-bedroom, 2 baths in this general area?" Now, you obviously, I don't know what the price range in your area is, but in the area I was in, which was South Carolina, 15, 16 years ago, that was reasonable. That was a decent sized house, right? Like 250,000, 300,000. That's a nice house.
Same here.
South Carolina.
The average price in our county is 321. So you would have a deal all day. You would have an agent take you out and try to close something up. Yeah, that'd be a good one.
So you're not going to ask me for my driver's license.
No, I'm not. No. No.
Now, if you were maybe a female agent before, maybe you got in the car with me or something, they might say, "Hey, can we get your driver?" Maybe, but you're just a regular guy, a regular real estate agent. And even if you did, it's fine. I give you my driver's license. I have a real driver's license. So we jump in the car, you pull up 6 listings, we drive out, we look at 6 listings, and every single listing I say, "Man, I love it. Put a contract on it." I'll put, "Oh, he wants what? 250. I'll put $25,000 down if he'll owner finance it." Next one, I'll put 20, I'll put whatever. And you would go, "Okay, well, I'll call the listing agent." And you even if he told the listing agent, "Hey, look, this guy's putting contracts on houses. He's going to buy whatever house comes in first."
Mm-hmm.
And so 2 days later, they come back and they say, "Yeah, I'll take the house." They'll take the offer. So
and that's kind of interesting too, because with these situations that we're seeing a lot of here, it's not really these are like identity theft purchases where these people don't even have the property, whereas you actually purchased the property but just took out several loans on one property, right?
What? Well, I'm sorry. Because the scenario I'm giving you is I'm trying to kind of. I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm explaining right now what I'm trying to say is that you wouldn't be like, you haven't done anything wrong. But think about what you just did. You're facilitating a fraud by doing what you do every day. There's no reason for you to, even if you said, "You know what, something's wrong, I need to get this guy's ID." Okay, get it. If it was a fake ID, you would, even if it was real or fake, you wouldn't know. You'd put it down, you'd scan it. There's no way for you to really check. We go out, we look for the house. I buy the house. We set a schedule of closing. I show up with my money. I close. I put the money down in a cashier's check. I have a bank account. We sign the paperwork. Now I own the house. I have to start making payments in a month or so, 45 days, 30 days, whatever it may be. And everybody involved, the title company asks for a driver's license. Here's my driver's license. So I'm giving everybody what they want. The transaction goes where the title company hasn't done anything wrong because because everything checks out, because it does check out. So now I've bought this house. I, of course, would end up satisfying the loan on the house and borrowing multiple loans on it, which we can talk about later. Or I could satisfy the loan on the house, the owner finance loan, and their old loan, and then I could just sell that house. Even if the original seller saw that the house was on the market, what are they going to do? They're going to think, "Well, I'm okay," because they might call me and say, "Hey, I see that house is on the market." I say, "Oh yeah, well, turns out that the area is going up and I got transferred, so I'm going to sell the house. But don't worry, I'm making the payments, and don't worry, we'll pay off your mortgage at closing." They think everything's fine because they think they have their owner finance mortgage on title, but I've already satisfied that.
Wow.
So they could show up the day after the closing or 2 days later, and it's just too late.
Oh my gosh.
So, because even if they showed up 3 days, a week later and thought, "Hey, we haven't got our check yet," I would just go, like, if they called or something, I'd say, "That's crazy." Like, "Well, don't worry, let me call the title company." I'd call title. Hey, call them back and say, "Hey, they said that they're putting it in the mail. They had to cut checks. It takes a couple of days."
And that's my question too. In Florida, you do all settlements at title companies. Do any of these happen at attorneys' offices? In Delaware, we only do settlements at attorneys' offices. We don't have title companies that do closings.
Right. Yeah. There are attorneys that also do real estate transactions, but I'd say the bulk of, I bet you 75 to 80% of them are at title companies. It really probably 90%.
Do you find was it easier in your time to do a transaction at one versus the other, or was it really all?
It's exactly the same. The difference is the closing agent that walks in is either a closing agent that says, "Hi, I'm the closing agent," or they come in, they say, "Hi, I'm the attorney."
It's just
there's no difference. You still get a HUD statement, truth in lending, good faith. You sign the mortgage application. You sign all the disclosures. Like everything's identical, with the exception of one is John Thompson, attorney, real estate attorney at law, and one's lawyer's title company. So, and it doesn't matter because that attorney's still getting his policy through the same lenders, the same title insurance companies. It's still going to be Old Republic or Lawyer's Title or whoever. So with that said, back to your original, there was no reason for those people to be weary of me. In your situation, I can see why the title company is questioning that closing, because they thought, why won't this guy get on a Zoom? Why won't this guy this? Why is he putting up all these barriers? Why is it so hard for us to get in touch with this person? Because that person's trying to cover their identity. That's somebody who doesn't have his scam down right. Does that make sense? Like he doesn't have all the pieces.
And that's what's kind of been happening. People from overseas who are just throwing a shot in a barrel. They're saying, "Hey, look, I own this property. Here's the information that I have. Here's what's kind of going on," and they don't really
see that. Like that's exactly what it is. If you were to try and pull that off, you would know what was customary.
Right.
You would know they're going to ask this. I can't do that. I need to figure out how to get around that, or I need to get somebody to do the Zoom for me.
Right. Which is a big one that these attorneys' offices are at least trying to do before we get to settlement. If they've never seen the buyer, no one can really get in touch with or the seller, whoever, both sides. Zoom is a big one, which we can get into later too with the tech stuff. I wanted to ask about that versus your time and now. But yeah, Zoom is a big one. Trying to get a face-to-face at least. So I would have that covered too. Yeah.
Law enforcement often questions him, not because he's suspected of a crime, but because they find him fascinating. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I can see, I could see that they figured that out. If they hadn't figured it out, then I'd have to say, hey, this, like, to me, if the guy got on a Zoom and did the whole transaction and provided all the documents, then I'd say the title company didn't do anything wrong. A lot of people say, oh, it's the title company's fault. Well, how? They did everything. That's customary. Yeah, but this guy, there were some red flags.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing is that everyone in the transaction, especially in a place like Delaware where I do a bulk of my transactions, it's not a place where we run into a whole lot of just unusual stuff. It's a very small state, so things get around quickly about what you may find or see or whatever. And it's just kind of funny that kind of happened. And then in Delaware, we're starting to try to figure out patterns so that other people in the transaction can at least try to intercept before we get to closing. Everyone tries to keep in contact. We don't really get a lot of craziness. So, and I guess the point I'm trying to make is that every person in the transaction is actually doing what they're supposed to do. And we're trying to figure out ways, how can we go a little deeper? So if it is a scam, if there's a fraud involved, some of us, in the chain of transaction can try to find it before it gets to the attorney's office. And usually here, the attorney's office ends it. So they kind of get it.
I was going to say, it's funny you had mentioned, because in Hillsborough County, apparently there's been a rash of title thefts recently. And I actually, I've actually gone to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office several times and talked with detectives in the last month or so. And yeah, a lot of them, they had a guy, it's actually several guys. It ended up being several guys. He initially thought it was one guy, the detective I talked to, but they just caught them where the guy was driving around. They were just looking for abandoned properties where you could tell like the yard's been overgrown, and they would go in and transfer the warrant or the deed, or they would take the person's identity. They would say, hey, I'm so-and-so, the guy that owns this property. I'm him. They put it on the market. Somebody would come to closing, and then they'd try and do a closing, like a Zoom style closing, and they would send a copy of, let's say, the driver's license. Well, they'd make a driver's license and send it, because think about it, if I do a Zoom, I don't have to provide my driver's license. I just have to show it. So you can't really tell, like if it's a notary closing or a remote closing, you can have a notary or something, where you do like, right. So you say, yeah, here's my license. You scan a copy and send it to them. They go, oh, okay.
That's really crazy. And, I haven't had any of those happen quite yet. Now, this is you said Hillsborough County. That's is that South Carolina or North Carolina? Where is that at?
Oh, I'm in Florida. That's Tampa. Tampa area.
Okay, so Hillsborough County is in Tampa. That's in Tampa. That's not in Tampa. Okay. So at the time, right, kind of back to, the big thing I want to do too is have this interview and this conversation from a real estate professional's, another real estate professional's perspective, right? Did you have any agents, brokers, whoever in Tampa who knew what was kind of happening and said, you know what, we're just going to continue to go with Matt on this? Like, basically, was there any agent who you were like, he knows what's going on, he just likes the money? And is there a way that an agent who may be faced with that, who's watching this, like, man, I think something weird is happening with one of my clients. They've got a lot of money. How do I kind of go through this? Or what are some of the thoughts and banter back and forth? Or what happened to any agent that may have with you?
So it's so funny you even asked that, because like I literally saw this guy in the gym a month ago.
Damn.
And I've mentioned his name before on podcasts, and people have reached out to him. And so he's like, I am asking you not to mention my name again. And I was like, I can't tell people about this. He was asking you not to mention my name.
Telling, correct? I'm pretty sure you told in some of the interviews, this one of the people is like still an agent. Is that?
Oh yeah. Oh no. Listen, I know agents. I know people that weren't even real estate agents at the time.
Okay.
That then became agents and then became brokers. So it's like, I did over $1 million in bad loans for you, and you then became a real estate agent and now a real estate broker. So, I know there was this. So that guy, he's still a real estate agent. He was never, he was indicted, but only as an unnamed co-conspirator. And so he was never actually prosecuted. They were going to prosecute him. They just, by the time I got caught, the whole financial industry was collapsing. So he just didn't get prosecuted.
Damn.
Nice guy. But what ended up happening was he knew that I was buying properties using fake identities or synthetic identities. And so he was going out and finding properties that he knew, hey, you can buy this property for, let's say, $50,000, but you could probably get it appraised at $200,000 because of what I was doing in the area. I was raising the I was raising the
sales price.
Yeah, I was recording the sales price.
Right.
Higher than buying properties. What?
So it would be higher than the contract price. What you would actually go to the county recorder of deeds, and it would be higher, 100,000, 70,000 difference higher than what was actually settled on.
At least that much, yeah. So I'm buying properties for $50,000. We're closing for $50,000,
right?
But I'm recording the closing at $200,000.
Now here's where I'm going to pause.
Yeah.
How are you doing this? Because I don't think in our state, and maybe there's been legislation that's changed this. I don't think a buyer or a person who closed on a home in Delaware, at least, can go and record their own deed. So how did you get around that? How did that?
Initially I was dating the girl at the title company, the manager of the title company.
Okay.
But that turned into me figuring out that if I just told the owner of the title company or the person I was dealing with that the seller was insisting that we record the deed the same day. And I was like, so look, if you want to give it to me, I'll drive it up there and bring it right back. And they go, oh, no problem.
Wow.
And they would give it to me. They'd give me their check. And then I would add a difference in the doc stamps. So if it was, let's say I bought the house for $50,000 and the doc stamps should have been $350. I would just add an extra, let's say, $1,050. And then I would change the sales price from $50,000 to $200,000. And so when I paid the extra doc stamps and recorded it at $200,000, it would show up as a sale for $200,000. And I paid the doc stamps, so there's no question. And then you bring it back and give it to the title company. And I'm pretty sure, like, I had a good relationship with these people, so they trusted me because, you know, people trust me for some reason. And so, you know, I'm closing transactions. I've been closing transactions for years and they've never had any issues. So why wouldn't they trust me? And I'm doing them a favor. It's like, hey, if you want to drive downtown, they, oh, no. So the other thing is, let's say I bought your house right now.
Yeah.
You and I don't have to go to a real estate agent.
Right.
You could simply sign a warranty deed, or we could create a warranty deed. First of all, you could transfer your property into my name. Then I could go downtown, get a transaction form, fill it out, pay the doc stamps, and they would take it. And they would record the sale of your house to Matt Cox for $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000, whatever I paid the doc stamps on and said it was being recorded at, as long as they matched up.
Wow.
And then it would show up in public records a week later or 2 weeks, however far your county's behind. Might be the same day.
No, our county, so that would be bad for somewhere like Delaware. We're behind on recordation. So
yeah, and everybody is. Some places are months and months behind. Some places are 3 days behind.
Right.
So it would show up saying, hey, Matt Cox just bought Bert's property for $300,000. There was no lawyer involved. Now, you'd still have a lien on your property because you have a lien from Bank of America for $300,000. And then I'd go fill out a satisfaction of mortgage. And I could record that 4 days later or a week later because, you know, it takes time for the title company to mail it. Mm-hmm. So a week later, I go and I file that document in public records. They would accept it. They'd scan it. Even if they said, why do you have this? All I have to say is, oh, Bank of America mailed this to me. And I called them and asked them what it was. And they said they accidentally mailed it to me and they should have mailed it to you. And they told me to bring it down here and just have you record it. And they were like, and I did this all the time. They would go, oh, that happens sometimes. And they'd scan it, let me pay the $12 fee to record it, or $10 or $7, whatever it is. And it gets recorded. And a couple of days later, it shows up saying there's no mortgage on the property. Now I own your property that I bought for $400,000. There's no lien on it. And then I go put your house on the market, sell it. You might figure it out when you're driving by the property.
You would sell someone's house right from under them, kind of? That's what's happening there?
Right. Well, you could do it. It's easy to do that if I'm renting the house. Now, if you live in the house, it's more, not that I haven't done it, but more difficult to do. I borrowed 3 mortgages on a guy's house that was living in the house one time. So usually I like to try and rent the house, because then I don't need this guy showing up. Like, what if something happens?
Right.
So I would typically rent the house. So you have no clue. You know, you don't have a clue until one day I stop paying you rent. You go by the house to knock on the door and say, what's going on? You check the mail and you see that there's 4 people foreclosing. Or if I've sold the property, you show up, knock on the door and say, hey, is Matt Cox there? And of course, I say, you know, the new owner says, oh, that's the guy we bought the house from. You say, no, I own the house. He goes, no, they go, no, you don't. I own the house.
Wow. Now, in that situation, let's say that there was an agent somewhere, maybe, I don't know where it would be in that situation, but what was the disposition of maybe some of the agents you did come across? Were a lot of them aloof and did not even understand what was going on? Maybe
most of them had no idea. Like the ones I told you about in South Carolina, or the agents I dealt with in Nashville, Tennessee, they had no idea. Right. None.
Was there
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, was there anything where you were like, wow, this guy should probably know that, or should at least look at this, or were they just doing their job and kind of opening doors, filling out contracts? That was it.
Unlike I think a lot of people that are maybe trying these types of scams, in my particular instance, I know I would craft a story so that as I know you're driving me around, I can tell you my story so that later when you asked questions, it made sense. So I'll give you an example. And this is once again in South Carolina. Okay. We're driving around and let's say you say, you live around here? And I go, I just moved to the area about a couple months ago, about 2-3 months ago.
Okay, so you're new. Right. So that's what I'm thinking as an agent. I'm like, okay, so he's not from here. He doesn't really know. Okay.
I just got transferred from my job. I was in Tampa, Florida. I was there for like 5 years. I worked at the same job for about 5 years. They just transferred me. Oh, okay. And then he would say, did you own a house there? I'd say, no, I was renting from somebody. Probably about, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, I got into a real bad car accident. And, I had to claim bankruptcy. I've reestablished my credit really just in the last few months because of the bankruptcy and stuff. I just started getting credit cards, So I really have no credit. The bankruptcy is off now, but I just don't really have any credit. I don't even know if it shows up. And that way he's thinking, okay, so he can't get a mortgage, because I know what the real estate agent's thinking. He can't get a mortgage. And I'd say, but like I said, I have 10% down. I've been on my job 5 years. You can pull my credit, but I only have a couple credit cards and no credit scores.
This is not a problem. As an agent, I'm thinking this isn't a problem.
Yeah, you're thinking, okay, it makes sense. He's got good job stability. He's got a good down payment. I can probably get somebody to owner finance the house. Maybe. And I'm not picky. Okay. I'm not asking you, hey, your $300,000 house, I want to get that house for $280,000 and I want you to owner finance it. No, I'll pay your asking price of $300,000, which you didn't really think you were going to get anyway.
Right. So I think I'm going to put a quick pin in this because there's going to be other agents in our area who watch this. I think that agents who come across leads, come across potential clients who have some of these things, maybe they don't care at all about trying to negotiate at all. They're giving you a backstory, but there may be some holes in there somewhere. Maybe those are things that are red flags that us agents, as we're going around, instead of like calculating the commission check because we can hear the dollars going,
right?
Which everyone does. But what we don't want is for someone to end up buying a home and with a false identity or anything like that. So agents, everything that Matt's kind of saying right now, I would say we should pay attention to.
It makes you look bad. It makes you, because you're representing the client and they think you're looking out for them. And the problem is that, what training course is there to detect somebody who's trying to use you to further a fraud? There
isn't at all. And that's why I found this time and I wanted to really try to make this relevant and as juicy as possible, because we don't. We have continuing education. You wrote continuing education courses for lenders, for mortgage people while you were away. So you kind of get it that there needs to be that. But there really isn't anything super deep on the fraud. And I believe that fraud is going to pick up in real estate with the dollar situation and digital coin and central banks stuff. I think that there's going to be a lot of crafty overseas money that's going to come.
That's one of the things they were talking about. The guys were talking about was the detectives were talking about was like overseas fraud, where people are coming over here and they're borrowing tons of money or buying properties, selling them in their name, getting the money, transferring it, and then leaving. Because let's face it, if you go to another country, like most countries are not going to extradite their citizens back to the United States.
No.
So, if you go back to Iran,
it's over. You never get out of here with the bank's money and a property. It's over.
Yeah, you go to Iran with 300,000. It's like showing up with 2 million.
Exactly. And I don't want any agent in any market to be a part of that, or to be victim of that because they didn't do any diligence or pick up some subtle signs or have an idea of like what's coming in the future. So I think that this is super relevant for that.
He built some of the nation's largest banks out of an estimated $55 million because $50 million wasn't enough and $60 million seemed excessive. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crimes, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
Where I was going to kind of segue into is I guess we were talking about overseas stuff. Let's get into social. When you were doing it, when was the timeline of when your scam was at its height? What years were that, if you can?
I would say from 2000 until always, whenever somebody asks me, that always irritates me because my U.S. attorney used to say he did this for over a decade. I was like, it wasn't over a decade.
It wasn't a decade.
You know, but it's like arguing. You know, she's saying, you know, he burglarized 30 houses, and I'm saying I burglarized 22. Like
exactly.
You're still a scumbag.
It's got their teeth in you. I already know. I know. Yeah,
it's so stupid. But yeah, it was from probably 2000 until 2000 and almost 2007. I got arrested like just shy of 2007. So it was about 7 years.
7 years. Okay, so you're
not a decade.
Yeah, for anybody watching this, yeah, whatever. No. So I know you were out and about. You were living a really exciting life. I don't know if you really had any time for social media because it was a little bit around that time. I'm 32, so I remember from like 05 to 7 was MySpace. Did you ever get on MySpace?
No.
Did you ever reach out to anyone on MySpace?
No, because no. You know what had just come out maybe a year, 6 months to a year was Facebook.
Okay.
But like the girl I was dating just before I got caught was on MySpace. And then I remember she told me, she's like, you want to get, she said, I'm going to start a Facebook page and move everybody over to Facebook. Do you want to start a Facebook page? And I was like, I'm number one on the Secret Service's most wanted list. Like, I feel like that's a mistake, but so I'm going to go with no.
Yeah, that's a no. Yeah. And
I'm going to go with a hard no on that.
And I hate to segue. Is this the one who you were like, yeah, minus expenses? When she was like, we just made out with this money,
no.
minus expenses, and she was like, I want to go home.
That was Becky. That was the chick named Becky. She was
okay.
Oh, listen, that me just saying that, and that was just me just in the course of just like
I find it.
I wasn't being a smart ass. I just happened to say, well, I mean, yeah, she's like, we just made $50,000, and I was like, well, yeah, minus expenses. And she just went nuts.
I find that funny too, because listing when you're doing a listing, in the listing presentation, you're talking to the seller and they're figuring out how much you're going to make, and I'm like minus my expenses because I got to take pictures. I'm going to do your lawn care I'm going to get your grass cut if it's a vacant property. So I'll say minus expenses, and I will see some of them go, well, you still made $10,000, and I'm like, well, I had my expenses for listing the property, marketing, if I'm going to do a drone video, if I'm going to do some of these things. So anytime I ever saw that come up in your story, I was like, that's hilarious. People don't.
Well, I mean, that always kills me. Like when your attorney says it's $20,000, so you're going to make $20,000? No. First of all, let's put aside the fact that I have the fact that I have overhead, the fact that I have a secretary, the fact that I have an assistant, the fact that there are going to be multiple paralegals working on your stuff, all the hours I'm going to have to put in, because if there's 40 hours of wired or taped wired conversations from the DEA on your case, do you know how long it takes to listen to 40 hours of wired?
40 hours.
At least 40 hours.
At least when bored.
Right. So you start let's put all that aside.
Right.
I went to college, which I'm still paying, paying student loans on. I had to go to law school. I practiced under someone else for a year or two. Not that you have to, but that's the way it typically works. Like you start adding it, like that's why you're paying me. because
Yep.
I'm not a guy that worked at Home Depot and is now selling property because I have 7 or 8 years of, or at least 4 to 6 years of schooling. At least you took the you took the real estate exam. You have continuing education courses that people take. They don't know any of that.
No, these things all come quarterly, yearly. These are things that are cost of business. The rent at our office, just various things I need to facilitate. Yeah,
and there's things that you're doing that they don't realize, that people in the normal course of business don't realize. I'll give you an example. I met with a guy, and I'm not going to say his name. If he watches this, he'll know.
Okay.
He was flipping houses. I met with him, and I was paid to go and give like a talk in Houston, in Texas.
Okay.
And so while I was there, he showed me some of the properties he's flipping.
Okay.
And he's a real estate agent. I'm sorry, not a real estate agent. Sorry, he's not a real estate agent. He's just an investor. He invests, fixes up houses and sells them. So as we're driving, but he's young. Okay. And as he's driving, we go to the property. He goes, here, I'm going to turn here. He goes, okay, hold on. He said, I usually bring people this way. He said, because if you come from the other way, he said, you drive through the projects to get here. He goes, I don't take people that way. I always come this way. And my first, and he was like, yeah, like, right. Like that's good. Right. And I thought that's redlining. That's steering. Right. And I thought, that's steering. Like you just told me that you're right, which is illegal. It's illegal to steer people through a nice neighborhood to get to the property you're selling so that they don't realize how close they are to the bad neighborhood.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, so I remember I looked at him and I go, that's steering. And he goes, right. And I went, no. I said, that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that. And he went, what do you mean? And I explained it to him, and I said, if your buyer were to find that out, or if you were to admit that, or if they could prove that, then I said that opens you up to a lawsuit. So I said I wouldn't do that, and I at least wouldn't tell anybody that's. So if you don't mentally do it, but you're telling me that you're proud of yourself for doing this, you're admitting, not realizing you're admitting to something that's fraud.
Yeah.
So then, as we were driving, and I was like, man, how do you find these, like, this is a great neighborhood. He goes, I know. He's like, this area and this area are good. They're kind of up and coming. He goes, I never buy in this area. And he was like, because that area, right now they're tearing down this, they're doing this. I started naming all these things, and I went, you never buy there? He's like, no, and it's a poor neighborhood, and it's this and that. And I went, that's redlining.
Yeah. And on the flip side, if he's going over to sellers or homeowners in these areas and go, hey, down the street, they're shooting all the time. Aren't you ready to sell? That's blockbusting. So there's those angles that, there's those angles, right? This is really good that you do have to think about. Now, he's an investor, so he's not bound by the ethics that NAR has.
Right. And he's not doing it. I was going to say, he wasn't doing it maliciously. He thought it was just good strategy. And it's like, okay, look, I get it. People do it, but he doesn't realize that what he's saying is he's bragging about, it's like saying that, hey, here's what I do. I tell them I'm going to give them new washers and dryers, and I show them pictures of these really nice washer and dryers. But then after closing, I give them these, and they're like half the price. Like he didn't say that, but I'm saying and he's like, kind of like, or I show, what I'm saying? Yeah, he's kind of proud, and it was like, no, like if that's what you do, fine. But
I've been in those situations as an agent who's bound by certain ethics or what have you with the NAR and Delaware Association of Realtors. One thing I will definitely say about that is that people definitely need to be careful on what they say to people. You never know who's going to be from what regulatory agency, who might be doing a secret shopper, even though, whoever they might report back to. What you say can be on that thin line of facilitating a fraud, doing blockbusting, doing redlining, or any of those things. And I think that that's really important for agents to kind of really tighten up on, especially the climate that we're going to go into in the real estate sales arena. It's going to get really tough here. So I think that.
Well, and also here's the thing. First of all, you don't get a lot of repeat clients that way. Secondly, is that clients that you're selling their homes, or you're trying to, or buyers that you're trying to find them homes, they don't realize that those are the kinds of things, like all they think is he's just trying to sell me a property so he can make a commission. No, wait a second. I genuinely want you to find a decent house in a decent area that represents you, or I'm sorry, that works for you, because I want you to buy your next house from me. I want you to, because let's face it, after 3 or 4 years, you're not going to survive as a real estate agent unless you're getting referrals.
Oh yeah.
Like you can't survive on walk-in business, and you can't survive on, on an ad here or there. You need to hold out for 4 or 5 years until you get some referrals.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to make sure that your borrowers, your clients, don't move into a property and 3 months later realize, oh my God, they're killing people out here.
Absolutely.
And this guy knew that. And this guy didn't mention that. Or, hey, listen, I saw a video. Did I send you that video?
I don't know.
Okay. I want to say I thought, I got to send this. I know I sent this to you. Hold on.
All right.
I had to have sent it to. Oh, come on. Why would I? Did I send it to you? Oh my God. I sent it to somebody. It was a TikTok where the guy's a real estate agent who is in front of a house, and he's sitting there. He's like, hey, this is a great first time buyer, great neighborhood, great that, like, he's pitching the house, and all of a sudden you hear bam, 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 bam. There are shots fired, and he kind of does this, like this, and then he stops and he goes, damn it. Like, start it over.
That is hilarious.
I was like, that, for any real estate person, that was hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know what you would do in that situation. That is, I guess you just got to reshoot it and kind of be very. I don't know. I don't know how you go, but you got to redo the content. But when someone asks you about that area,
oh my God,
I don't know how you go about that. But I'm glad you mentioned TikTok. So, not going to hold you much longer, but I wanted to ask, okay, in 2023's landscape of Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, this, that, Rumble, are any of those you're thinking, man, if this was around, I'd kill it on this thing? And should agents be careful of leads that may come in on some of these social media sites? Or what are some of the insights someone as yourself who may see the real estate transaction from a different angle and say, man, I think people who are in the real estate business should be careful of this?
Well, I think the selling, I mean, as far as social media, I don't, what I was thinking about, and this was when I was locked up. When I was locked up, and this was after 2000 and the 2008 financial crisis, let's say it was 2012 to 2016, 17, where prices were just climbing up, right? They were starting to all kind of tick back up. And there were all these companies that were saying, hey, we'll buy your house sight unseen.
Yes.
Like they'll do a drive-by appraisal or whatever. Use whatever it is. Is it a Zillow, or I don't know what they were using. They were using, God, there's a name for it, where they generate how much your house is worth.
Zestimate?
A what?
Zestimate from Zillow, where they kind of run some basic numbers.
It's more involved than that. But yeah, there's a program, I forget. It really doesn't cost that much. It's like $15 or $20. Okay. And you have a pretty good estimate of what the house is worth. So done by an appraiser. So these companies you would call them, they give you one, and it was never really, let's say your house was worth $300,000. It was never really be like $290, but they'll close in 3 or 4 days. So they would do a remote closing. They close on your house because the trend was still moving up for several years. Mm-hmm. But I just remember thinking, like, that wasn't something that was even possible in my day. And I always remember I would sit there in prison staring at the channel and just shake my head and think, my God, like how not only are you telling me this guy never has to see the house, he's going to send me all the money in, let's say it takes a week. Mm-hmm. Like, and public records is behind. Like, I could go rent a house, or buy a house, satisfy any mortgages on it, call 3 or 4 of these places, close on all 3 or 4 of them at different title companies, and then just get the money and wire the money. And then, of course, you can wire the money. You can wire it to a couple different bank accounts and then put it on cryptocurrency. You could buy gold. You could buy silver. You could put it on Cashapp. There's about 100 different apps you could put it on and just start pulling the money out of ATM machines. So
that was going to be my big.
Those scams weren't available back then that they are now. So that's one. The other one is another one that this is a scam that happened. I read a couple articles. There was a couple articles. There were actually ended up being two women. Two women were going out and this is what I believe they were doing. They never got that much involved in the article, but they were going and getting, so they weren't even renting the houses. Here's what they were doing. They were going and they were renting an Airbnb for a week.
Okay.
Before they were even there, they put it up for sale. And so they schedule a bunch of people to come by the house for like for sale by owner. Multiple people just under what it should be selling for. Multiple people are coming by and seeing the house, and they're taking deposits.
Ooh.
The deposits were sent. Now in the paper they say they set up a title company, but really all they did was set up an email to what looked like a title company. And so they had the money direct or deposited into an account, like a business account in the name of a title company. Now, of course, I could come up right now. I could open up a corporation in anybody's name, get the corporate paperwork, and open up several bank accounts online that say Tampa Bay Title Company. And then I could ask you to put your deposit in the title company, give you the information, you wire the money to the title company. Now I've got, so they made like $500,000. I don't remember I don't know if it was 350,000. I don't know if it was $1 million. So let's say it was $500,000 in a month or two doing this on different Airbnbs, taking the money and then taking off with the money. Eventually the one girl got caught, immediately rolled over on the other person.
Damn.
So that's another scam that's out there.
And I want to put a pin in that too for agents. If you have a listing or you get an inquiry from a seller about a property, I would say maybe Google that on Airbnb and see if this property was on Airbnb in the last year. Okay, that might be suspicious. Maybe not, but I think that if people can take this information and say, okay, I'm a heavy listing agent. Sometimes I don't talk to every single seller. This property is rather exotic. Let me see if this was on Airbnb recently, and just make sure that there's no one, posing as that seller and doing something nefarious while you are their listing agent with some sort of listing agreement. Now, I know most scammers probably are going to try to sign a listing agreement. Some may not, or some maybe you're a buyer's agent. Well, and showing someone something, and
what I think people need to think about is the fact that most people, even when something doesn't seem right, something doesn't quite feel right, like listen, your intuition, people just a lot of times they just don't listen to it, right? Like they think, that doesn't sound right, and I feel funny about it, but oh well. Look, most people don't think fraud. Typically, somebody says something to you and you think, that seems a little contradictory toward what he said earlier, but maybe there's a reason. Maybe I don't understand it. Let me ask. You ask. The person gives you an answer that still doesn't quite make sense, but you drop it because people think, it's none of my business. What am I going to do? That's what he said. I have to believe that. Wait a second. There's nothing wrong with I love Ronald Reagan's quote, which was, trust, but verify. I'm not trying to insult you. I'm looking out for my buyer. I'm looking out for the seller. I'm looking out for everybody. So what you're saying doesn't make sense. Let me make a phone call.
Yes.
Let me call that job. Let me call that other agent. Let me call the title company that he said there was an issue. Was it? So the guy says, oh, this fell through and that fell through. They did this, they did that. And you're saying, that doesn't really make sense. You might make a phone call to another title company or another real estate agent or someone just to say, hey, look, this is what the guy said. Doesn't quite make sense. Like, I'm not trying to be a Karen, but I also don't want to be answering questions at a grand jury in 6 months and have my seller hate my guts because he thinks you didn't even make a call.
Yes.
If what I'm telling you is true, I'm not going to get offended that you called to double check. I'm not going to get offended that you maybe took a picture of my driver's license. I'm not going to get offended because you took a picture of my license tag. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If the person were to say, "Hey man, what are you doing that for?" All you have to do is say, the problem is, look, my broker, he's a real pain in the ass. He's always, there's been a rash of fraud. So they are asking us to check everybody's ID. They're asking us to take a photo of everybody's tag. I know, trust me, I'm with you. What a jerk, but I have to do it. Like, what am I going to say? Forget it, man. I don't want anything to do with you. Listen, if that guy says that guy was going to be such a problem by the end of the transaction, you just dodged a bullet.
Yep.
Even if he's not doing anything wrong. Yeah. Because I don't know if people know this that are going to watch this, but I owned a brokerage business. Yep. And I remember as a mortgage broker, not a real estate broker, but as a mortgage broker, I remember people would come and sit down in the office. Oh, I'm sorry. The brokers would come and say, man, listen, this guy, I'm disclosing to this guy, I'm writing down, we're doing the disclosures where they explain how much all the costs are.
Closing disclosures or whatever.
Right. All these, anti-coercion disclosures, like I'm not forcing you to do this. I'm not forcing. So, you sign a bunch of disclosures if anybody who hasn't purchased a property. Yep. And they're just kind of cursory, disclosures up front. They're not at the closing. You just sign them when you apply. So he's like, this guy's complaining about this. He's, can you come talk to him? And I would usually walk in and say, sure, hey, my name is Matt. I'm the manager here. Even though I own the place, I always said I was like the manager.
Right.
I'm the manager. What can I, what's going on? And they'd say, oh, this interest rate is this, and what's this fee here, and what's this fee? And I would go through and I would disclose to them, boom, 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 boom. And they would say, well, that's too high. That's it. And I'd say, listen, let me explain something. And I would go through why these fees are this, and they're pretty standard. And some of them are actually higher, but here's the reason why they're higher. And then I would give them my canned responses on why they're higher. Your credit, you have some dings on your credit. You have this, you have that. And then they would say, well, I can get a better deal. I'd say, you know what? Here's what I'm suggesting. You probably should go somewhere else.
Right.
Like, no offense. This is what the fees are. This is how it works. This is what we're dealing with. We do this. We can do this because we are so good at what we do. You've been turned down. You're not here because we were your first choice. We're here because someone told you to come here, because you have some dings on your credit, because your bank said no, your credit union said no, the real estate agent knows that you have some problems with your employment, whatever.
Right.
That's why you're here. That's why we charge extra, because we're signed up with additional companies that can get you qualified, that we can get you the actual loan. So I would go through that and I would draw a hard line in the sand, because here was the problem. And I used to tell these guys, the brokers, they'd be like, man, you just let that. I would have, Matt, I'm going to call him back. I'll lower my fee. And I'd say, no, here's the problem. If this guy is this much of a problem when he's signing documents that mean absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things, he's going to be an absolute nightmare by the end.
Yes. And
that's why he's here.
Yeah. And a lot of people in the real estate profession, especially starting out, will hold on to those on the line, those fishes that are just nightmares. And I want to take it back to where you were saying a little like verification. If that becomes a major issue, not only is that a red flag, but you're going to dodge a bullet. And I think that in our business, especially today, the real estate business today is going through a shift. The team structure, a lot of brokerage structures are changing for a lot of agents. And I think that fraud in the next 5 years or 10 years as this real estate is going to be big. And I think that a lot of agents are going to be susceptible to it because they can't do what you just said. We'll just go, you know what, this is.
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard to draw that line. It's hard because you feel like you don't want to be a jerk. You feel like a jerk doing that.
Yep.
Like my brokers would never do it. They felt like they were being a jerk. Like they're like, I didn't mind being a hard ass. You know, they didn't want to do it. They felt the way to complete the transaction was to be the nice guy. You know, and the thing is that it was funny. It was always like the night, like those guys that were such a pain in the ass. You always ended up cutting they'd cut their fees. They do this. In the end, it just wasn't worth it. You could have been working or looking for someone that was, that was a better client, that was easier to deal with, that wasn't going to give you such a hard time while you were dealing with this guy that's going to take twice as much time and want to pay you half as much. And he's never going to send you anybody.
And then won't even send you a referral.
He'll never be happy. No matter how, if you did that loan for nothing, you know what? If you were a real estate agent, you did that you ended up doing a sale for zero, making no money. That guy's always going to say, yeah, that real estate agent, he was a jerk. He screwed me over. You're like, I made no money. I did everything I could do for you.
Yeah.
But it's funny, the guys that never question anything and are totally okay, you get paid full commission, they thank you and thank you. Those are the guys that are a joy to work with, and they send you people.
Always.
It's nuts.
It's 90% always. The ones who are smooth, if they have a question, we answer it, always way easier.
Right.
And they usually don't have a problem with any extra verification if need be. So, which is my big thing, right now, I truly believe that agents need to be aware because of the hunger that's going to come with some of the slow up in business with rising interest rates, inventory.
Fraud, you're right. I absolutely agree with you. Fraud's going to blow up.
I really do. I believe so. And I think that if any agent takes 5 or 10 minutes, learns about your story, watches a little bit of this, and just does one of these things and picks up on one thing in your story and say, I'm going to watch out for that the next time.
Yeah.
So you can save yourself from being in an arbitration or worse, in a lawsuit, and with your license on the line because you were just like, well, that was weird, but whatever. I'm going to get paid.
Yeah, I'm going to look the other way.
Yeah,
I had oh gosh, I can tell you. Listen, I'm not even.
I want to know what are your best stories with another real estate professional. I know pretty much everything about your story when it comes to just being on the road and everything, but you get into a little bit of the minutia with some of the other agents in the area. But I want to know if there was one that stood out, or even one you've already told before about another real estate professional. Before we go.
So I had one real estate. So did you ever read my book? Even if you didn't, you should say yes.
Huh? I will get the book. I never read the. I'm a moocher.
Unbelievable.
I got all your free stuff, but I haven't put any money.
It's one book, bro. It's like $20.
I will plug the book myself because I'm a fan. Shark in the Housing Pool. Go get that. I know it's anyway.
Wow. So, it actually is a good book. So. Listen, it's a good book if you're just reading. I mean, just to read. But if you're in real estate, bro, like people read that book that are in real estate, like they're like, man, people read that book, and here's what happens. I got about 30% of them that are like, you're a horrible human being, and then 70% are like, bro, like I hate to say this, but I've never read a book faster and understood it more and really, really rooted for you. Like, I know what you did was wrong. They're like, I know what you did was wrong, but God, bro, it was amazing.
For anyone who's ever worked with me, I'm not a fraudster, never have been. I've never even got a misdemeanor. But what I will say is this. One of the, I find myself rooting for you. Every time you tell your story, I'm like, dude, you should have never put those Mexican, whatever you put in the trunk, where you were letting them know where you were going, but they didn't know at the airport when you left the car, and then you had.
Yeah, but we weren't going there.
Yeah. Okay. So you weren't going there. You were throwing
right.
them off.
I was.
Yeah, okay.
We would leave like Spanish for Dummies, and then we would leave like we printed out brochures from a hotel in Spain.
Right.
So, and you actually went and got lira, like I think it was lira or something, where it was actually, and left a couple lira in the trunk so that we knew when they found the car, they would look they'd be searching it and they'd be like, oh my God.
Right.
And we left the car in the airport.
Yeah. So
they're like,
let's go, guys, go get them. And you guys are
I'm sure they're searching surveillance photos and look, it's like, well, I didn't go to Spain. So,
okay.
Yeah, but
yeah.
None of that played well in front of the judge. Okay. So, here's what I was going to say. There was one real estate agent, and listen, as much as she smoked, she can't still be alive. So I don't mind saying her name was Lynn Cadella, and she was, and she can't say anything anyway, because this is so true.
Okay.
So she was in Brandon, Florida, and she worked with a real estate investor that was just the nicest guy. But Lynn, I'm telling you right now, I got her loans. So one, she bought, I want to say it was 6 or 8 duplexes, all of them owner financed. I'm sorry, all of them owner occupied. So we closed like 8, and I could be wrong. When you read the book, you might be like, oh, it was only 6 or it was 9. I forget. Let's say 8. And I did this multiple times, but this woman was a real estate agent.
Okay.
So one, I had to change her. So she was a real estate agent, but I had to say she worked for like a developer and provide W-2s and pay stubs because she was commission based.
Right. She's W-9 or whatever. Yeah, whatever we get. I know it's
right. So you guys get like 1099 and then you file your own taxes, right? You're self-employed. But I had to say that like she worked, I think, for like a development company and she was W-2, and I had to say she made like $130,000 a year. And of course, and verify that for her. So 2 years W-2s, they're completely fraudulent.
Wow.
Then what I did was I had her buy like 8 owner-occupied duplexes. So she's saying she's going to move into the duplex herself.
Right.
Oh, wait a minute. Right. I do mention this in the book. It was 8 of them. Yeah, it was 8. No, not 8. It was 6. It was 6 of them. 6 of them.
6 so she's supposed to be moving into them. That's what owner-occupied means. Whoever's watching this investor term, owner-occupied versus absentee owner, whatever man. Okay, go ahead.
Well, yeah, as opposed to buying it, or if it was an owner-occupied property, then you're moving in. The borrower, the person buying the house, is telling the bank, I'm going to move in this duplex and I'm going to live there in that duplex, as opposed to saying, I'm buying this duplex to rent it out.
And that has interest rate implications. Right.
And down payment.
Yeah, various implications versus living in it and using it, living in it. Yeah, so.
Exactly. So if I'm moving in it, then the bank will let me put down 5%.
Okay.
Because I live there.
Right.
If I'm saying I'm buying it strictly as an investment property, they're like, you got to put down a minimum of 20. You have to put down 20%.
Got it. Yep.
So she was putting down. And listen, back then, some of these were subprime loans, so they were 100% financing. So she buys like 6 of them. It wasn't 8. I'm almost positive it was 6. She buys 6 of them on the same day, same time, with different mortgage companies. I'm sorry, lenders, different title companies. So she, instead of having to put down, let's say, $120,000, she put down maybe $10,000 or $15,000 to get like 6 of these things.
Woo!
Rent them out.
Woo!
Now, I mentioned this one in the book only because it comes back on me and I have to kind of fix the whole problem, which almost never did, because I multiple times did this, many times. But I think I mentioned Lynn was the one in the book. But this woman, I'll bet you I did maybe 10 or 12 loans for her. Probably several $1 million worth of loans. One of the things she did was she lived on like a cul-de-sac. So I did a loan for her house, the house next to her. There's like maybe 5 houses on the cul-de-sac. She owned like every house on the cul-de-sac. A couple of, I think, quadplexes. I know a couple duplexes. Yeah, she was, listen.
Did she get greedy? I know in the book you might do more, but did she get greedy, or was this all in one shot? Or did it build up?
This was over the course of 6 months to a year. And keep in mind, every single time that the loans are showing up, now these are loans showing up, we now have to, when she gets to the next few loans, I have to explain to the new lender, these duplexes are all rented out. And because they were so overly financed, we have to now make fake leases for every single property. And I remember telling her, listen, if you're buying anything else this year, you better start buying now, because in about 3 months from now, they're going to ask for your taxes and we're going to have to do the taxes. Now it's funny because she still closed a few more. And then I remember she was like, okay, so I'm done, right? And I was like, no, guess what? I got a chick that does taxes. So now I can do your taxes, showing that you're making a ton of money on the real estate. So listen, her fraud file that I was giving these lenders was so thick. And I think she may have been the first person where I actually, to show her down payment and her reserves, because you have to have reserves.
Yes. Yep.
So people don't realize that a lot of lenders say, we'll lend you the money on this house that you're buying, but you own like 6 or 8 other properties. We need to make sure that you have enough money in reserves in case something comes up. So we want you to have 6 months worth of payments in reserve for each one of these properties.
Each one. Oh shit.
This is what's funny. This is when you would sometimes get these lenders who were like, this person's bought 12 properties last year. It's insane. So we have to be able to know, like, something's not right. So we're going to give them an underwriting guideline. We're going to give them a stipulation that's so outrageous. We're not going to turn them down, but we're going to give them an outrageous stipulation so we don't have to lend to them.
There you go. Okay.
And so, of course, me being me, I remember I created a bank, created the actual bank statements, and then showed that she had like $120,000 in reserves in this bank that had been open for, I have 3, 4, 5 bank statements. And so we give them to them. And then of course, then they call the bank, and we have someone that answers the phone for the bank and transfers it. And then of course I get on the phone and I start tapping like, okay, what's the name? All right. And that's Cadella. Okay. Hold on.
I made this up the whole time.
Oh yeah. I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I cannot tell you how much money's in her account, but I can verify. What do you have? And then I'd say, which bank? Okay. In December. All right. What is the average balance for December? And they'd tell me, oh, it's $122,750. And I go, yep. Yeah. We're good. Okay. They go, okay, thank you. And then I hang up the phone. I call in and I say, it's going to close.
This lady was a real estate broker on top.
Real estate agent. She knows I'm giving them fake this, fake that, fake this. And her whole thing was like, is it going to close? Is it going to close? And of course it closed. And so I loved Lynn. I thought Lynn was great. Lynn was super cool too. Lynn was like in her 50s, smoked a couple packs a day, had a Harley. She had a bunch of cars, had a Harley, and this chick was living large.
Now, what happened to her? Did anything ever happen to her? Or she skated away?
I have no idea what happened to Lynn. I mean, Lynn was a survivor. Like this was all in 2003, or 2002, 2003. No, wait. 2002, 2000. 2002, 2003. And then I took off in late 2003. So I don't know what happened to her.
That's crazy. So this realtor was really running, and she knew.
Listen, I can tell you, I had mortgage brokers that were mortgage brokers and real estate agents, and they were running scam after, like they were not necessarily scams, but they were committing fraud where they'd take people out, they'd find them a house, and then they'd come back and they'd go, listen, the guy wants to buy the house. I'd say, okay. And they'd say, can I get him some money back at closing? What do you mean? Like he can put down, we can show that he can put down 5%, but I want to get him his down payment back, but I'd also like to pay off his credit cards, because I convinced him to buy the house by telling him, we'll pay off your $20,000 in credit cards. And I would go, okay, well, what'll it appraise at? Let's find out. So we find out what we could get it appraised at. And then I do the numbers, and I can get them $18,000 out at closing. They go, okay, well, great, because then that'll pay off their credit cards and that'll help them. And then they can afford the larger payment. So as you know, that's a cash back scheme.
Yes, that's a kickback, or not a kickback, but yeah, cash back. It's not a kickback.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the technical fraud it's a cash back. Even though let's say you bring $10,000 to closing, but you get a check back for $38,000. So they're making $18,000 on the purchase price, and then they would make, if you're lucky, maybe they make all the payments. Maybe they refinance in 2 years. Maybe they make the payments and refinance. That's great. But a lot of times, if you have no money involved,
right,
in the transaction. Anything that goes wrong, the first thing you're going to think is, I didn't put any money down on this house. I'll just stop making the payments. So that's why it's, obviously they want you to be able to put equity into the transaction, which is your down payment.
Exactly. Wow. That's crazy though. But we've been on here over an hour. I didn't want to hold you too much longer. And honestly, I could talk to you for another hour about just other aspects of the real estate business between then and now. But I guess we'll kind of cut it off. And I do believe that we have some things here I can chop up and relay to people at my office. One thing I do want to plug, any realtor that is watching this, one, please check out Matt Cox's story. If you don't know, I mean, I don't care if you're a realtor, a real estate attorney, and you're watching this in Delaware, another mortgage broker, whatever, because everything in it is super relevant to our entire industry. Terminology, the process he was using to close at a number and record at a different number, the way he had relationships with the title office and recorder of deeds. You even spoke to appraisers who would tell you, hey, this is coming here in this area, and another one over here sold for something, and these were all properties you had just sold in that area. It took Ybor City, correct? You literally
Ybor City
took that whole area from $50,000 average houses to like 300,000.
It was like a little like 200 and whatever 60,000. Matter of fact, it was Forbes said that the zip code, Ybor City zip code, was among the fastest top 20 growing zip codes in the nation. After I'd been there for about a year. They said out of the top 20 fastest growing zip codes in the nation, Ybor City was one of them. And listen,
that's insane.
The FBI said I did 109 transactions in like just under 2 years. $11.5 million I borrowed.
So you were moving, dude. You were doing this.
I didn't even feel like I was working that hard. I mean, I had plenty of time. I mean, I like what I do.
Right. Me too. And it's fun. But dang, you really took it there. But anyway, my last plug, I guess, is for your book, Shark in the Housing Pool. Do you want to say anything last minutes about the book? I'm going to encourage every agent in my office to get the book, and we'll go from there.
You haven't even read the book,
including me. I'm encouraging me to get it.
Listen, if you give me your address, I'll mail you a book for free.
Yeah, I'm gonna text you my address, man. And I don't know if you saw on my YouTube channel, I do book for Wednesday. I try to do book reviews. I kind of slacked off on it, but this one I might do a series on it, and because it's in my field, which I love.
I was gonna say you gotta put up better thumbnails. You can get a guy from Fiverr. What are you doing? You could be Graham Stephan.
I need to invest more into it. I'm kind of new to it, and you're right. I'm gonna invest more time into it because I love this too. I love talking and giving info. So.
What's funny about YouTube is the amount of credibility it gives you. Like if you were just putting up a video a week, if it was 15 minutes, if it was just like, hey, I had a horrible week, I had a client do this, I had this happen. Even if you complained for 15 minutes a week on a crappy phone video with just put your phone up there and then did it, honestly, you would build a huge following, and and next thing you know, you start doing these with real estate professionals around, and then you just do little financial things here and there. And I'm telling you right now, it's not hard to grow. I mean, I'm not saying it's not hard, but it's not a massive effort for the payoff. And if nothing else, for the credibility it gives you as a professional.
Right. Right.
But I know you got to go.
No, that's exactly right. I'm gonna commit to upgrading some of those things because I do want to do this and be credible with this and use this as another piece of my armor and the utility belt for clients and stuff like that. So, Matt, thank you so much for your time. I definitely maybe at the end of the year get some more of your time and see how the real estate market plays out and see what other frauds have come up with. And that's it, man. Thank you. Have a great weekend. I don't know if you celebrate Easter. You and your wife celebrate Easter or whatever. So y'all have a good Easter. All that good stuff.
Thank you. You too. Hey, this is Matt Cox, and that was Bert Ferguson. And if you guys like the video, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Also, leave me a comment, and I think I said like the video. Share the video. Leave me a comment. You can go into the the description box, and I'm going to leave Bert's channel in the description box if you guys want to check out his channel. And also, I don't know if you know this, but I wrote a bunch of true crime books, so check out the trailers.
Using forgeries and bogus identities, Matthew B. Cox, one of the most ingenious con men in history, built America's biggest banks out of millions. Despite numerous encounters with bank security, state, and federal authorities, Cox narrowly, and quite luckily, avoided capture for years. Eventually, he topped the U.S. Secret Service's most wanted list and led the U.S. Marshals, FBI, and Secret Service on a 3-year chase, while jet-setting around the world with his attractive female accomplices. Cox has been declared one of the most prolific mortgage fraud con artists of all time by CNBC's American Greed. Bloomberg Businessweek called him the mortgage industry's worst nightmare, while Dateline NBC described Cox as a gifted forger and silver-tongued liar. Playboy magazine proclaimed his scam was real estate fraud, and he was the best. Shark in the Housing Pool is Cox's exhilarating first-person account of his stranger-than-fiction story. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Bent is the story of John J. Boziak's phenomenal life of crime. Inked from head to toe, with an addiction to strippers and fast Cadillacs, Boziak was not your typical computer geek. He was, however, one of the most cunning scammers, counterfeiters, identity thieves, and escape artists alive, and a major thorn in the side of the U.S. Secret Service as they fought a war on cybercrime. With a savant-like ability to circumvent banking security and stay one step ahead of law enforcement, Boziak made millions of dollars in the international cyber underworld with the help of the Chinese and the Russians. Then, leaving nothing but a John Doe warrant and a cleaned-out bank account in his wake, he vanished. Boziak's stranger-than-fiction tale of ingenious scams and impossible escapes, of brazen run-ins with the law and secret desires to straighten out and settle down, makes his story a true crime con game that will keep you guessing. Bent: How a Homeless Teen Became One of the Cybercrime Industry's Most Prolific Counterfeiters. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Buried by the U.S. government and ignored by the national media, this is the story they don't want you to know. When Frank Amadeo met with President George W. Bush at the White House to discuss NATO operations in Afghanistan, no one knew that he'd already embezzled nearly $200 million from the federal government, money he intended to use to bankroll his plan to take over the world. From Amadeo's global headquarters in the shadow of Florida's Disney World, with a nearly inexhaustible supply of the Internal Revenue Service's funds, Amadeo acquired multiple businesses, amassing a mega conglomerate. Driven by his delusions of world conquest, he negotiated the purchase of a squadron of American fighter jets and the controlling interest in a former Soviet ICBM factory. He began working to build the largest private militia on the planet, over 1 million Africans strong. Simultaneously, Amadeo hired an international black ops force to orchestrate a coup in the Congo while plotting to take over several small Eastern European countries. The most disturbing part of it all is, had the U.S. government not thwarted his plans, he might have just pulled it off. It's insanity, the bizarre, true story of a bipolar megalomaniac's insane plan for total world domination. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Pierre Rossini, in the 1990s, was a 20-something-year-old Los Angeles-based drug trafficker of ecstasy and ice. He and his associates drove luxury European supercars, lived in Beverly Hills penthouses, and dated Playboy models while dodging federal indictments. Then, 2 FBI officers with the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force entered the picture. Dirty agents willing to fix cases and identify informants. Suddenly, 2 of Rossini's associates, confidential informants working with federal law enforcement, were murdered. Everyone pointed to Rossini. As his co-defendants prepared for trial, U.S. Attorney Robert Mueller sat down to debrief Rossini at Leavenworth Penitentiary, and another story emerged. A tale of FBI corruption and complicity in murder. You see, Chiarosini knew something that no one else knew: the truth. And Robert Mueller and the federal government have been covering it up to this very day. Devil Exposed. A twisted tale of drug trafficking, corruption, and murder in the City of Angels. Available on Amazon and Audible.
Bailout is a psychological true crime thriller that pits a narcissistic conman against an egotistical, pathological liar. Marcus Schrinker, the money manager who attempted to fake his own death during the 2008 financial crisis, is about to be released from prison, and he's ready to talk. He's ready to tell you the story no one's heard. Schrinker sits down with true crime writer Matthew B. Cox, a fellow inmate serving time for bank fraud. Schrinker lays out the details: the disgruntled clients who persecuted him for unanticipated market losses, the affair that ruined his marriage, and the treachery of his scorned wife, the woman who framed him for securities fraud, leaving him no choice but to make a bogus distress call and plunge from his multi-million-dollar private aircraft in the dead of night. The $11.1 million in life insurance, the missing $1.5 million in gold. The fact is, Schrinker wants you to think he's innocent. The problem is, Cox knows Schrinker's a pathological liar, and his story's a fabrication. As Cox subtly coaxes, cajoles, and yes, cons Schrinker into revealing his deceptions, his stranger-than-fiction life of lies slowly unravels. This is the story Schrinker didn't want you to know. Bailout: The Life and Lies of Marcus Schrinker. Available now on Barnes & Noble, Etsy, and Audible.
Matthew B. Cox is a conman, incarcerated in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a variety of bank fraud-related scams. Despite not having a drug problem, Cox inexplicably ends up in the prison's residential drug abuse program, known as RDAP. A drug program in name only. RDAP is an invasive behavior modification therapy, specifically designed to correct the cognitive thinking errors associated with criminal behavior. The program is a non-fiction dark comedy which chronicles Cox's side-splitting journey. This first-person account is a fascinating glimpse at the survivor-like atmosphere inside of the government-sponsored rehabilitation unit. While navigating the treachery of his backstabbing peers, Cox simultaneously manipulates prison policies and the bumbling staff every step of the way. The program: How a Conman Survived the Federal Bureau of Prisons' Cult of RDAP. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
If you saw anything you like, links to all the books are in the description box.